And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I'm joined by Electrek Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
And this is a special episode because I'm also joined by Joseph Constantine, News Director of Global Strategy and Growth. How's it going, Joseph?
It's very good. How's it going, Micah? How are things for you guys?
Awesome. We're glad to have you here. We've got a bunch of cool stories to talk about this week, but the first one we're going to lead off with is about NIU, the electric scooter and moped and dirt bike and a whole bunch of other small electric vehicle company from China, one of the leading sort of smart scooter makers in the world. And we just had the chance to go visit their factory. And so we're excited to have you here with us so that we can talk about a bit about what we saw there at the factory, but also a little more about the company in general. So thanks a lot for being here with us. And I think we'll start off with just a little bit of an overview of sort of what we saw there, and then we can get into a little more detail about NIU. It's been, I think you guys just recently celebrated 10 years, so there's a lot to talk about the company. So our tour was really interesting because we basically got sort of free run of the factory. You can see, if you guys are watching the podcast here with us, you can see we started out in the showroom here looking at a bunch of different vehicles, sort of a cross section of everything the company makes. Some of it was familiar to me. I've actually been a NIU owner for the last 4 or 5 years. So in addition to covering the company, I've personally spent a lot of time riding these scooters, but a lot of it was new, especially the domestic products. Like you can see here, there are a lot of different looking scooters and mopeds that we haven't really seen from the international market. That's because the domestic market is so huge for NIU that we see a lot of these cool electric mopeds and other designs. But we really had sort of free reign to just roam around the factory and see production, see the research and development and sort of every stage of the process. We even got to go into the engineering department, but we weren't allowed to film there, which is understandable because there's a lot of new stuff going on, but it was fascinating to see. And so I think, I'll just sort of summarize here real quick the processes that we saw, but it really started with the Research and Development Center, where they come up with these new designs and then they put them through like grueling tests. We saw like underwater tests where they just mash buttons like 10,000 times in case you ever ride your scooter underwater and need to, turn on your blinker 10,000 times. We saw like long-term UV testing, accelerated aging. And then once that stuff passes, it moves into the factory floor, what you're seeing here with us, where they first go through these quality inspections, making sure all the parts from suppliers are made to spec, at which point they get loaded on these really cool sort of like aerial conveyor systems where the parts are pre-assembled ahead of the production line, so that on the production line, the workers can just sort of reach behind them and grab all the specific parts they need that drop down. It's like this ballet of engineering coming together in this really cool way. And then these scooters go down these production lines that you can see here, and it's just kind of crazy how quickly all this goes together. Like if you walk too quickly down the line, you miss critical steps. In just a few minutes, it goes from a bare frame to motors and batteries and panels and seats and everything being installed, and then moving on to the testing stage, where there are these long checklists that they do static tests and then riding tests. And then once it passes everything, then it finally goes off into these big storage rooms where they're either trucked around to different local dealers inside of China, or they're prepared for shipment to international dealers. Like we saw I think it's the XQI, the dirt bike. Is that the right one, Joseph?
Yeah,
exactly. So we saw that one getting ready for export. So those are actually boxed up in these big metal cages. If you see here, these are the kick scooters. They get packaged in their like retail cardboard boxes right there. So it's kind of cool to see like the last hands that touch them before we get to like open them on like a Christmas morning kind of situation. And so the whole process was just really fascinating to see. For me, a lot of this was new, but I guess you've seen this pretty much all the time. I mean, this is what you deal with. Obviously, you're more on the the global side of things as opposed to just inside of China. But
Yeah.
what surprised me with all the attention to detail is something you've probably seen every day, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've been looking at, watching this video go by, and thinking it brings back a lot of memories from when I first started walking into the factories nearly 10 years ago. The process has definitely become much larger in scale over the past decade. But at the end of the day, I mean, the attention to detail in terms of QC is, I think new kind of delivers kind of at the top of the game within our space of building two-wheel electric, both in China and for global markets. So it's good that you got to experience it. I know you experienced a couple of our competitors as well. So, and I think you can attest that across the board, there is just, a tremendous, sense of attention to detail when it comes to building these bikes, getting them prepared for shipment, and then ultimately delivery for both domestic and overseas markets.
Absolutely. And how much of this sort of has been in place since the beginning, and how much of this is the company learned over time how to sort of like grow and improve these processes? Because 10 years, that's a long time in the electric mobility space.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, you can imagine that the manufacturing process has evolved over the past decade, from building, only having a single model to having literally dozens of different types of vehicle models that we now build that are both low speed and high speed, like what's showing on the screen right now. So there's, completely different manufacturing processes and QC processes that need to go into the final manufacturing. But then if you take that backwards to the whole R&D process, you're talking about completely different supply chain, different types of time periods for R&D. So everything, takes time to learn the skill sets, bring in the team members that are specialized in the different categories of vehicles. And so this is not something that's happened overnight. Being able to deliver like the XQi3 electric dirt bike or the RQi high speed motorcycle, that is something that we started looking at probably just before COVID in 2018, 2019, but really started delivering these things and just in the past 18 months.
Right. So there must be quite long product cycles here in terms of that development time to bring something to life.
Definitely in the higher speed categories for sure. In the lower speed category of vehicles that we are selling primarily in China, those cycles are much more rapid, and that has to do with the competition of the Chinese market, combined with just the user sentiment for the next having the next cool new moped in China. It's almost like the mobile handsets that we experience in the West. Their mopeds are just like their either their iPhones or their Samsungs or their Huawei's or HTCs. They want something rapidly evolving.
Right, and that was actually something I found so interesting while I was there at the factory because, we often cover sort of the international side of new, but what I learned was that in the domestic market, because the rules often change and sometimes quite quickly for regulations around electric scooters and electric bikes, new has to be very quick to react. And so I noticed that a lot of the scooters and mopeds had sort of really short rear ends compared to a few years ago, and the guys there
Yeah,
explained that, yeah, now there's a new rule that, the rear can only be like 45 centimeters or something. And so suddenly all these designs had to change very quickly.
exactly, and that requires a design team, an R&D team that's able to adapt and be very nimble. Because the over the past 4 or 5 years, local governments and the national government in China have made significant changes to how the vehicles are designed in terms of size, but also what battery types, power, motor, and all of that has been under a close eye and close regulation, and it's changing towards smaller, more safe, low-speed vehicles to navigate, China's, ever-growing cities.
Absolutely. And now I know that a lot of what you work on is probably still confidential. You've got
Mhm.
sort of the crystal ball that none of us have in terms of what's coming next from new. But from what
Yeah.
you can tell us, can you give us an idea of what we should be expecting in the next year or two, the directions we should see new heading in?
Well, I think we hint at it in different ways. We've showcased just recently in the past few months, a micro car, and something that we will be bringing to the European market in the not so distant future. So that's nothing that's kind of behind any kind of curtain, but that will show you that we do see a growing trend in that space in Europe. At the same time, we've been quietly introducing some of our off-road vehicles beyond just the XQi3. So that gives you a picture as to, we believe that electrifying that space is quite interesting, as well as like the UTV market in the United States. We believe that's something that needs some more attention, and bringing in different types of technology, especially in the battery types, and then also motors as well. And we think that's an opportunity for us in the coming months and coming years. So it's a combination of looking at how can we take everything that we have learned and built over the past decade and begin in urban micromobility, and begin applying that to some mobility spaces that have not been really kind of attended to by any of our competitors that have been building for that market for quite some time. So we're pretty excited about some of these new categories that we're venturing into, and it kind of keeps us on our toes to be constantly looking out into the market as to how can we take our best technologies and apply them to underserved areas.
Yeah, the different off-road applications, especially the four-wheeler categories, that's really interesting. I know a year or two ago we were looking at concepts of new electric ATVs. Do you think that's something that we're going to see the company dive deeper in? I know you mentioned UTVs as well.
I think it's something that we are already testing, and to see what the market appetite is for it. There are some limitations to electric off-road vehicles, one being range, and being out in the middle of the wilderness, and also really trying to figure out, are we coming with a solution to find a problem? And that is something that we're trying to discover right now. It really is like, what is the consumer problem that we can solve with an electric off-road vehicle at this moment? And we're still trying to identify that through putting these products out into the market, talking to dealers, talking to customers, seeing really where the use case is for these. And I think we're pretty close to kind of uncovering that, just like some of the competitors are as well. So we're the only way to really learn and see if there is a market for it, especially in this space right now, is through this process of build to discover, and then see if we can unlock true value for ourselves and for the customers.
Right. Yeah, I actually have an electric UTV. I keep it on my parents' small ranch in Florida, and the thing is incredible. So I
Yeah,
definitely think that, the advantages are there if you guys can take what you've already built for two-wheelers and apply it in that space. It's just like
absolutely.
the ownership difference is very stark. So I'm very
Yeah, I
excited to
think
see.
that I think you're right. I think for electric ATV, UTV use case, for ranches and farms, for the agriculture business, there's a definite use case. Now it's getting down to, how can you make this cost advantageous to the farm, to the owners, the management, and that's what we're trying to really unlock right now, is how you bring that perfect product market fit together for that use case. And that's going to take a little bit of time to do the unlocking, but I think we're pretty close to figuring that out.
Right. And do you think that news expertise in the high tech, the smart side of building electric vehicles is going to play in fairly heavily there, or is it more about bringing in your powertrain, your hardware, that sort of thing? Because the ATV, the UTV space, it's less of a smart vehicle space right now, right? These are very much sort of simple working vehicles, and one thing you guys do very well is bringing that smart side with the connected tech.
Yeah, I think the connected tech part to our products, to our vehicles, is one of those elements that can differentiate us from a lot of the competition out there. Because I think when it comes to motors, batteries, controllers, a lot of that is becoming more and more commoditized, especially in this space. So I think where one of the next steps with our connected part to our vehicles is really discovering with the users as to how to really create the value for them with that connected piece. Is it just through over the air updates that we can offer to the vehicles that no one else can, or is there some other element that we can provide to them that is giving them a better user experience than they would from just a standard electric off-road vehicle? That right now I don't have an answer to. Micah, to be honest with you. I think the unlock will take some time before we really discover that.
That's fair.
I know we're coming up on the end of our time, but I just wanted to kind of ask a global question. Like, obviously, us in the U.S. are interested in NIU's products, whole line of them, personally anyway. Obviously, also tariffs are flying everywhere. Just a random, have you guys ever thought about building a factory in the U.S. or in North America?
Good question. That's a great question. So we already are in discussions with a number of different assemblers that are specialized in these types of vehicles in the United States already. So that's already happening. Additionally, we are working with global assemblers as well, in addition to what we're already assembling in China, to be able to navigate some of these issues that we're all experiencing with the tariffs. And I think the tariff situation is something that that everyone is going to have to deal with for many years to come. I believe it's a part of kind of the future geopolitical situation, and that's nothing that we can control. And so, in order to be able to manage and navigate that, we come up with multiple options to be able to optimize for it, so that we can get products to customers at the most affordable prices. That sounds a little bit canned, but in reality, I think that's it's not. I mean, I'm speaking about it for the first time right now, to be honest with you, but I do believe that. Getting vehicles assembled in the United States is a good thing on two fronts. One is I think it makes sense to reshore some of these activities. Two, it's actually can be more affordable to actually do it for these larger vehicles, for sure. The larger ATVs and UTVs absolutely can make a lot more sense to actually bring over pieces of the vehicle, and then find local supply chains as well within the North America region, to bring it all together to do a final assembly of a vehicle in the United States to then ship to anywhere. And that also allows us to be more nimble with our supply chain, where instead of just putting tons of inventory into the United States and crossing our fingers and hoping we can sell vehicles, we can now have a much more nimble just-in-time system that we just like we operate in China. So Micah, like those holding warehouses that you saw there, if you would have come back in 3 days, the vehicles that were sitting there would all have been changed over at least once in like that 3 or 4 day period. So that's it's just in time manufacturing, which it's kind of wild to see, especially when you see those vehicles all lined up for delivery. So it's if you were to next time you come, we'll bring you in one day, and then we'll have you come back 4 or 5 days later to see kind of how it all changes over in just such a short period of time. It's pretty wild to see.
Yeah. I wish I could have set up a time lapse there, because the number of bikes coming off of those lines and the rate that they were coming off, I was wondering where are these all going to go? Like, the warehouse is full.
They have a market. We have more than 3,000 outlets that sell our vehicles in China. So for sure, they have a destination immediately after you saw them on the line. But yeah, there's a lot to learn from the way that China manufactures. And that's, one last thing, I know we got to go, but like the one good point that, as you do more factory visits in China, is really pointing out one area that China does innovate on is at the manufacturing level. And that is a point of innovation for them. It's not just about the product, but it's also the manufacturing that needs to become more innovative. And that's something that, the European markets and the American market can also learn from, is like, how to compete and innovate at the manufacturing level to get products to customers at the most affordable prices. So
absolutely. Well, wherever you sort of fall on the spectrum, I think that, we can all agree that China is just a manufacturing powerhouse, and that we all have a lot to learn from how things are built there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot to be learned from how things are built in Germany and how things are built in America, and bringing that all together to optimize for kind of global manufacturing is kind of, I think, the right path forward for everyone, to be honest.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Joseph. It was fascinating to hear, straight from the company itself, after having been able to get such deep access into the factory and into the showroom. So we really appreciate you spending some time here with us and telling us from your side.
Absolutely. It's great being with you guys, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Joseph.
Sounds great.
All right.
Cool.
Super
We're gonna
interesting.
see a lot of new, a lot of new stuff coming.
New
Sounds
stuff.
like.
All right, what's next? Tern launches an all-new GSD electric cargo bike, redefining high-end compact cargo e-bikes. Kind of the
Yeah,
original right here.
yeah, Tern. They're the Taiwanese company that is known for making sort of like you said, the original compact cargo bike, right? So these are like full 450-ish pound rated cargo bikes, very, very highly capable. But the GSD is still fairly compact size. This is not your giant long tail cargo bikes. And the GSD has long been sort of the cream of the crop of compact cargo bikes. A lot of companies have tried to imitate Tern, usually in appearance, rarely in like quality or features or performance. And now Tern has come back with its third generation of this design, which is very exciting to see. There's several different changes here. We've got a new larger diameter tubing. It's a hydroformed aluminum frame, so it's stiffer and stronger. It's got a slightly longer wheelbase, lower center of gravity, so it handles better. Now it's actually been increased in weight capacity a bit, so it's rated up to 463 pounds, 210 kilos. In turn, they make a big emphasis on like industry leading certification. So, a lot of companies say, oh, it can carry 400, 450 pounds, but it's like $1,000 budget bike. If Tern says it can carry 463 pounds, they've like overloaded it significantly and tested it to failure to be comfortable saying, and for their lawyers to be comfortable saying it can carry 463 pounds. So that's one area that they really excel in, is not just having the high weight capacities, but actually getting the proper industry certification, and sometimes having to create new certification to be able to test up to those limits. There have been times that they've actually had to go to their part suppliers, like their fork makers, and say like, I need you to change like the way you heat treat this, or like the thickness of this, so that the bike can carry more, because it's your part is the thing that's breaking first, kind of thing. So really cool to see them continuing to push that boundary even further with the higher weight ratings. Of course, now they've got the newest Bosch Smart System. It's got more like the more locking, more alarms, more software update, more connectivity, all of that nice stuff that comes with Bosch. The ABS braking as well, I think. And then, of course, they've still got that vertical parking, which is always a neat feature. Very few e-bikes have that. A few have started to copy Tern, which it's great to see in other brands, but I think like we should really give Tern credit here for coming up with that really cool vertical parking concept that saves a lot of space for us apartment dwellers.
Yeah, it's a great innovation, and I love it's plugged in here too. So just the perfect situation for cities.
Yeah, it also just kind of looks cool. Like it's kind of like the bike on the wall that's a piece of art, except this
Yeah,
one you don't have to take down from the wall. Like you just tip it down and you're ready to ride.
exactly.
So yeah, so I mean they've definitely done a great job here. Now I will say, still quite pricey. I mean, this is the most expensive bike in their lineup. It starts at $4,999, but that's for like the sort of, I hesitate to say entry level, because nothing about this is entry level, but that's like, the first model. And then they go up several $1,000s to get like the nicest, internally geared shifter and this and that. So, starting at $5,000, but they get up until I think like the almost 8,000, if I'm not mistaken, for like the top of the line GSD, the double batteries, everything. So, keep in mind, this is not a cheap cargo e-bike. This is in the class of something that's going to compete with, like the Riesen Mollers, and like the top of the line German cargo bikes and the Dutch cargo bikes. This is like one of the industry leading models here. So you got to know that going in. But I will always say that if you're looking for a like full featured, super high quality electric cargo bike, but you don't want something massive, Tern is like the go-to brand, and the
Yep.
GSD is the top of the line for Tern. So really cool to see them updating this.
Yeah, and of course, the budget. Most people are going to be, that's kind of crazy for small cargo e-bike. There's others out there that aren't nearly as nice, 2,000 or less sometimes. But if you have the money, definitely check out the GSD.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Rad. Rad Power Bikes appoints a new CEO amid shifting company direction.
Yeah, we talked about on the last podcast, they had they didn't even announce. We kind of broke that. Yeah. I announced that their CEO had left. That was Phil Molyneux that they brought in a couple of years ago. And then once I reached out to them for comment and broke the story, then they got back to me after it was published, and they were like, now Rad is announcing that Phil is stepping down. And then just after the last podcast, we published that they announced a new CEO, Kathy Lench, I think is how it's pronounced. I'm not entirely sure. Who's going to be the new CEO, taking over for Phil Molyneux. We don't know too much about the direction she's going to take. Now, she does have significant retail leadership experience. She's had roles at Pottery Barn, Pier 1, Cost Plus World Market. So she's got the credentials for a big retail company.
I was going to say that definitely points to retail, like it's shops, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Like that direction.
And we know that when Rad announced that they were having another round of layoffs and that Phil Molyneux was leaving, that they talked about a commitment to retail and that they want to continue to expand their retail locations because they feel that that's the best way that someone can sort of grasp what a Rad Power bike is by experiencing it firsthand instead of buying online as a direct-to-consumer company. Now, that I think there is something to that. It's a lot easier to test out an e-bike in real life than just look at it on the screen, but it is a major shift for Rad because the company obviously started as a direct-to-consumer, buy it online. That's where, when they were at their peak, they were selling hundreds of thousands of e-bikes like that, and they definitely expanded into retail. They had, I think, at the top, like 6 or 7, maybe 8 locations. They've since closed a few, but they had a lot of their own Rad branded stores. It was like an Apple store for Rad bikes. Now they've expanded it to. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a friend in Denver who was just gushing about how nice the Rad store there was.
Yeah, it's an experience when you go in it.
Right.
And their dedicated staff there, they train those folks really well, and they're great to work with. So there's absolutely something to be said for this retail direction. But I think it comes at a time that Rad is really suffering on the direct-to-consumer side. Other companies like Electric e-bikes are eating their lunch there, and so I think that sort of out of necessity, Rad is taking that turn to retail as sort of a last vestige for them. And so it's a little early to see how that's going to work. Hopefully, with a change of CEO and a commitment to this retail strategy, hopefully it pays off for them, because they were such a pivotal force in the early days of the e-bike explosion in the US. The late 2010s was really when things started taking off. And then, of course, with the COVID pandemic, e-bike sales went through the roof, and Rad was leading the charge at that time. So we'll have to see whether they can sort of land on their feet here after several rounds of layoffs, almost an entirely new C-suite, and a switch to largely a retail-focused operation.
Yeah, it's super interesting, especially with Pedigo also kind of, I don't want to say in turmoil, but like trying to figure out what they're going to be like. I know a lot. So Pedigo has a different model where they have franchises, where I think Rad is doing that. They're going to fully own all the stores and manage and operate them. So Pedigo store owners, I think, are having kind of an identity crisis, where they're saying, we're having a hard time selling these $4,000 bikes, but like we can sell a lot of, we can put together a Electrek or even a Rad or whatever and make more money off of that than we are on our Pedigo bikes that nobody really wants to buy, even though they're quite nice, and they're just very expensive, and you're paying for a lot of overhead. So it's interesting that Rad's also getting into this space. I like it. I think it's going to put more butts in seats, so to speak. I think you know, you're going to be at a, you know, want to go check it out. Maybe you're bringing somebody with you. They're going to try it. Everybody likes an e-bike experience, so I'm all for it from you know, expanding the e-bike market. But I don't know that the business model makes sense. Retail's not a fun business these days, generally speaking, and with Pedigo having some issues there, I wonder how successful it'll be. But this woman seems to have a lot of experience in the retail space, so I wouldn't count them out.
Yeah, yeah, it feels a bit like sort of going, you know what, people might miss print journalism. So,
Let's get some printers.
yeah. But you know, it's early, so we'll see how this goes. Hopefully we're back with an update article in a few months saying like, wow, that really went well.
Yeah, maybe we need to do a store tour or something. I'm actually going to Denver tomorrow, so if maybe
There it
I'll
is.
take a visit to the store there. All right, let's move on. Velotric
I think it's
Breeze
Velotric.
launched as new cruiser e-bike, bringing comfort and speed.
Yeah, this is a totally new bike for Velotric. We've seen a lot of sort of updates to different models. You know, they came in with like the new Nomad and those sorts of things. But this is a brand new model we have not seen from them before. It's something of sort of like an urban cruiser almost. It's designed to be fairly simplistic, but bring a lot of what we've come to know and love from Velotric. So, you know, it's got like their waterproof batteries, it's got their UL rating, it's got the 15 different levels of pedal assist, the choice between torque sensor, cadence sensor. This one brings with it new lighting. I think the headlight's fairly similar, but we get these new turn signals on the rear seat stays, which you can kind of see in that picture there. They're really quite nice. They spread out the turn signals really far, about as far as you can on a bicycle, which is a um, you know, very narrow vehicle for turn signals. And so it actually works pretty well. You know, I often disparage turn signals on e-bikes because it just looks like a center line blinking light. So they did a pretty good job there. And the bike, you know, it's got class 3 speeds, which at this point it's hard to sell like a, you know, an above budget level bike that can't get up to 28 miles per hour, because everyone wants the option to have a throttle and the option to have higher speeds, even if you can't get them both at the same time. So it gives you all of that. But it's a surprisingly pricey bike. It's $1,800. Maybe in the future we see some sales. You know, like generally these products launch at some promotional price. This one seemed to launch at MSRP, and so at $1,800, you know, it's a very nice bike, but it's competing in a crowded space, right? Like you've got other competing products from Electrek, Ride One Up, Rad Power Bikes, Aventon, like all the usual suspects have models in this category of sort of like urban hybrid, like modest comfort bike kind of thing. And so to come in and say like $1,800, no suspension, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but is going to limit the number of people who want a bike like this, you know, with zero native suspension, that sort of thing. $1,800 just seems a little bit high in my opinion. Now they make great bikes, like, you know, they've been in the market for I think 3 years now, if I'm not mistaken, and like each bike they make gets better and better, and they started pretty good. So like if someone said I'm going to get a Velotric, I'd tell you like that's awesome, you're really going to enjoy it. But I'm just surprised to see, you know, I would have guessed this would come in at like $1,600, something like that. You know, it just seemed a little pricey to me.
Yeah, if you asked me to guess, I would have said 15 something, you know, maybe 13 on sale.
Yeah. Now we do have the tariffs and everything, so
Right.
you know, it could be that they're pricing that in already to say like, look, we're bringing these in now. We've already got like an extra 20% on top of the 25% we were paying. We're getting like brutalized here by these tariffs, so I get it. But we haven't seen too many other price increases in the industry, so they might be pricing this thing forward looking while we're comparing this to prices that haven't increased too much yet, potentially because there's still a lot of stock in the US that hasn't been brought in under new tariffs. So maybe that's why there's this disparity here. But it was a little bit surprising to me.
It kind of looks like they put the rear rack on this one, on the models thing, a little crooked. It looks, I don't know. I'm just a stickler for
Yeah,
these things.
yeah, I don't know if those arms are a little long on that one. Usually those, whatever they use for the lifestyle photography in the beginning are like factory prototypes. So
Right.
probably that one had a prototype rack that has been fixed.
Yeah. No, they look like good bikes though, and I even like the colors. It's nice to see some interesting colors coming out. We're looking at a pink one here. There's red, and there's this like, I don't know, darker than sky blue, a little bit electric colored maybe, but overall I like it.
Yeah, Velotric's always been good about giving us bright colors. Like they were brave from the beginning with like mango yellows, and
Oh,
so
right.
like I'm glad they're doing that.
Let their freak flag fly. All right, news story. Leading manufacturer recalls hundreds of thousands of electric scooters.
Yeah, over 220,000 scooters to be exact. This is the Segway 9-bot Max G30P, as well as the G30LP. These were super popular when they first came out. They've been selling for like 4, maybe 5 years, this model line. They've updated a few times, but this was like the first next generation scooter after that original Segway scooter that was like all over the place. If you remember around like 2017, 2018, the scooter that was kind of like the first model that Lime and Bird and everyone used until they realized that you couldn't use like a consumer personal scooter as a like commercial vehicle. This was the first upgrade over that. So obviously, 220,000 units as part of this recall. This was very, very widely sold, so it affects a lot of people. That being said, of that 220,000, there's only been a few that have been reported to have this defect, which is involving the folding mechanism, where the folding mechanism can fail. And of course, when you're riding an electric scooter and it folds, you're going to have a bad time. Usually that's going to end in a crash. And so of these, there are, I think, 60 something reported cases of it folding. And I think there were 20 incidents of injuries leading from this. No deaths, fortunately, but obviously, you don't want to be going 15, 18 miles an hour and have your scooter fold on you. So if you have a Segway Max scooter, definitely check. It's probably part of this recall. That folding mechanism was always like a little bit finicky. They just never really updated it. If you compare it to the folding mechanisms on basically anything that came out since around 2018 or 2019, you see they always have like a very robust secondary lock on them to make sure that even if like the first part fails, the second part will hold it. Usually it's some just like physical thing that slips over the folding lever to ensure that it can't release. And so I don't know what they're going to do here, whether they're going to like add some aftermarket thing, but if you've got one of these, definitely check to make sure that you're, if it's one of these scooters, and stop using it if you're still using it, because that folding mechanism is no longer considered safe.
It's kind of crazy the size, like 220,000. Like even if they don't have to service them, at some whatever, it's still they have to send out up to 220,000 parts, which is huge. Like that's monstrous.
Yeah.
So
I mean it sounds like when the story of the Ford Pinto recall, where they were trying to decide like how costly is this going to be versus how likely are we to see people keep dying.
keep
And
yeah.
fortunately, this is a much smaller vehicle with, if you fall off at 15 miles an hour, it's not like having your gas tank explode. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were a few days there where they were like, how are we going to handle hundreds of thousands of units? That's mind-boggling. Like you said, when you think about the repair operation or the compensation operation that's going to come out of this.
Yeah. blows my mind. I hope they survive it. Jeez.
Yeah, well, so now Segway's owned by Ninebot, which is a huge Chinese company. So I think they got pretty deep pockets at this point. I don't think this will be company ending, but people rightly should lose their job over this. Like that's, a recall of that big should never happen. Something like that should be caught long before you've got hundreds of thousands of units out there.
Yeah.
If you remember in the new video when we saw those kick scooters that were like bouncing around on the shaker tables with like weightlifting weights on them, that's the whole point. Like if something's going to break, that's how you find it, like on those shaker tables.
Right. Interesting. So it's not just for show. It's trying to find the weak points.
Yeah, like you find what breaks so you don't have a 220,000 unit recall.
Right. All right, let's move on. Police claim certain electric motorbikes being used almost exclusively for crime. That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, right. This stuff's kind of ruffles my feathers a bit. So, not that there's not some basis to this, but basically, this is a report out of England, specifically the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner Donna Jones claimed that Suron-style bikes in the area are almost exclusively used for criminal purposes, which seems a bit like a generalization if there ever was one, right? So the basis of this, like a lot of things, is rooted in some fact. We are seeing a lot of Suron-based crime in England, especially in the form of like purse snatching or phone snatching, which is kind of like the new purse snatching, I guess. And when I dug into this, like, yeah, you find like CCTV videos everywhere of someone just walking down the street and a dude in a Suron rolls up and grabs their phone and like continues off, and you can't chase them. They're fast. They don't have a license plate.
They're
Like
quiet.
they're just gone. Yeah, they're quiet. Yeah, you don't even know that they're there. Like someone's just texting, and then it's like yoink, the phone's out of their hand. And so, and it really is a problem. Police are trying to deal with this because if this was a real motorcycle, then there'd be a license plate on the back, and there's so many cameras in these English cities, like you'd have some video of it. And if they didn't have a license plate, they'd be pulled over by the police pretty quickly anyway. But because these are Surons, they're kind of these quasi-electric bicycle-sized vehicles, and they fit in this gray area. Well, it's not really gray. Like they're not legal on the street, but they're often passed off as like a big e-bike, and so they don't draw the same attention that if you like were driving a big like Kawasaki or Yamaha or Harley down the street without a license plate kind of thing. And so, while it's certainly not the case that these are used almost exclusively for crime, they have become a popular tool for criminals to commit these types of like snatch and grab crimes. We've seen this more in these cities in England, but I wouldn't be surprised if this phenomenon spreads, especially with the amount of these bikes in the US. I mean, they're just so popular. I could see this coming to big cities. Like, if I was in New York right now, I would not be walking around New York City with my head buried in my phone. I mean, generally I wouldn't anyway, because that's just not smart. But with the number of these like phone snatching videos of some dude on a Suron going by, like you're never going to catch that thing at 45 miles an hour. Even if you're on an e-bike, you're not going to catch it.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think this is a little bit. I mean, like you could get on a 35 mile per hour electric mountain bike with a Bafang Ultra on it, and kind of do the same thing. I think. I mean, a little bit slower, but yeah, I get. Like I realize that these are now used by criminals, but the implication that these things are only used for, I mean, even the criminals are probably having a good time, with all their stolen phone money, and they're just, having a great time with these things otherwise. But there's plenty of people that use these things for good,
I get your argument is actually the criminals don't use them exclusively for crime.
Right, exactly.
They're also on the dirt tracks.
Right. You see criminals every day on the mountain bike trails. No, I just think it's, over the top here. I think we need to kind of be more measured. And it sounds like the politicians in question just want to get these things licensed, and they're using that as a excuse,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, there's a big push for, especially with these types, that go above and beyond electric bicycle regulation to get these things, more heavily regulated. Now, I will say, like, you brought up that, well, you can do this on any e-bike, or like, with a Frail, or like a Frey e-bike with a Bafang Ultra. Um, so there's truth to that, but if you compare like the performance per the bike size, this is maybe slightly bigger than electric mountain bike, but we're talking like a 5-6 kilowatt motor compared to like a 1.5 kilowatt motor. So
Right.
the amount of power that you fit into this tiny little thing, that, I mean, in terms of the footprint, it really is the size of an electric bike, right? Like it's, maybe like
Yeah.
6 inches longer, but you put motorcycle power in something that could sneak into like a bicycle scenario.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Last story. The X Games just banned electric motorcycles for being too good.
Yeah, this is like the perfect advertising for electric motorcycles. The X Games has, I mean, it's right there. Like, it's not even like, hyperbole. They literally banned electric motorcycles because they said it was unfair to gassers. And I kind of get what they're saying. Like, you can do things on an electric motorcycle that you simply cannot do on an internal combustion engine dirt bike. Like, you can turn them, you can flip them, you can create new tricks that are simply not possible with a combustion engine dirt bike. And for a lot of people, that's been like part of the fun. Like, if we're looking at pictures here of the Stark Varge, which is just an incredible piece of engineering, it's a fascinating electric dirt bike that riders are actually using to innovate new tricks. And that's kind of the point of the X Games, right? Like, I mean, I remember like, Tony Hawk and watching like, the innovation of new tricks, and like how many turns can you get, and that was the whole point of like every year the X Games, people doing things that they hadn't ever done before and like setting new records. And now that's being possible because the technology is enabling it in ways that in the past, like, um, people tune their bikes differently, or people built different types of skateboards, etc. Like, it's an improvement in technology and an improvement in rider. But now, because that improvement is electric, suddenly the X Games is saying like, well, we think that's not fair to those who aren't riding an electric motorcycle. And so now they've banned X Games from actually competing. I'm sorry, they banned electric motorcycles from actually competing at the X Games. And I think that's ridiculous. Here I quoted an excerpt from Ride Apart because I think that they just like hit the nail on the head. They said at X Games, oh, sorry, that's the wrong part of the article, but that's the statement from the X Games. But basically, what they pointed out is that like this is here it is. What we likely have here are a bunch of crybaby competitors that don't like the Starks and other EV dirt bikes allowing riders to up the ante to the next level, to go harder than before, to take the sport of freestyle motocross to the next level, just like Deegan and Pastrana and Carmichael and McGrath and Hart and Barton did before them. And these same current riders got the folks of the X Games to capitulate to their crocodile tears. So that's
I love
basically
that.
it in a nutshell. Yeah, is that those that are anti-electric simply don't like the fact that new things are possible, and they can't do it because they are like these, they're these never electric folks that just like don't like it on principle. They won't accept that there's this new technology, and they don't like that others can do things they can't. And it's ridiculous that the X Games has basically capitulated to this and said, we won't allow, not even like a different category, just
I
we
was going to
won't allow
say
them to.
that seems like the solution, like have an electric category, and that'll be much more fun to watch because they're doing cooler stuff.
Yeah, but even then, like, so I get for racing, right? Like, in racing, there are real differences, especially range and that sort of thing. So like we had the Moto E, where
Right.
it was just electric, and at a certain point, especially in the early days of electric, I can see how that makes sense. But when the X Games, it's all about like performing these like mind-boggling stunts. I mean, we don't need an electric only category, right? Like what we're seeing is what someone with two wheels and a motor can physically do in the air. And if electric is better at it, then that's just what happens. Like let them do what they do best and amaze
Right.
us, right? That's the whole point. That's like why people watch, is to be amazed. And what you're saying is that's too amazing. Like you shouldn't be able to do such an amazing flip. Like your center of gravity is too low. You've got too much torque. No, that's the whole point. So to me, this is just ridiculous. And I can't believe that we even got here. Like someone blew it big time at the X Games when they made this decision.
Yeah. I mean, the statement kind of says that they're open to new stuff in the future. This is probably just a stopgap. I would imagine, if they're not idiots, that they're at least contemplating either a new category or having electric bikes in the competitions at a later date. This sounds like something they're just pushing off for now.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, uh, hopefully that's what they're gonna do. But even then, like I don't see why another category would be necessary.
Yep. All right, we've got a few comments. If you have any comments right now, this is your last chance. But I'll just jump in here. At the beginning, Jackson Bike says, Livy Dunn Riz make a cheap 72-volt e-bike someone. I feel like isn't that Talaria kind of inexpensive? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
compared to a mountain bike, it's pretty much the same price, $3,000 or $4,000.
yeah, and I've seen people do 72-volt conversions on the Bafang Ultra motor, like take a fray basically and run it at 72.
It's a little
Though at
hot.
a certain point, yeah, I think there's actually a regulation above, is it 60 volts, where like it becomes high voltage for like consumer products or
Right. You need
something.
like orange cabling and stuff.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's why for e-bikes you rarely ever see 72 volt in the e-bike space. Yes, when you get to motorcycles, that sort of thing. Also, when you get to higher power, at a certain point, if you stay at 48 or 60 volts, it's just like you need so much current that you're using like,
Thick wires.
garden hose size. Yeah. So, but yeah, like you almost never see 72 volt in the e-bike space.
All right, Fargo Townie says, I miss print journalism. That was during when we said we should do a print version. We should. On April 1st, maybe we'll announce our the Electrek magazine. And
Yeah, well,
then
it's hot.
last one is Michael Sprinzelis. There are different classes in different sports, so why not an electric category in moto? I kind of agree. I think that's the way to go. But eventually, who's going to watch the gas ones?
Those poor guys.
Yeah, old timey videos, I guess. And then he continues that his BBS HD will eventually be 72 volts. That sounds like kind of a Luna thing. Maybe look at those bikes as well. The what is that called? The X1, X2, Ludicrous. I think they got
Right.
that up to 60 volts, 2.5. I don't know. Yeah, the BBS SHD is really a tinkerable motor, and I think a lot of people have gotten that to 72 volts and probably beyond.
Yeah, that might be one of like the last great DIY motors, like because Bafang, as they've innovated, which they've made great stuff, but it's gotten harder to like mess around and DIY with their stuff because they've brought in their own sort of communications protocols and that sort of thing. But the BBS HD, like that was the one you could really get in and play around and do a lot of custom stuff, controller swaps, etc.
Yeah, high voltage controller. He burned out his Ludicrous V1.
Oh, he
Yeah, I
knows what
think
he's doing there.
ASCI makes a good controller. This Canadian company.
Yeah.
Check that out. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be excited to have you guys join us back here in another 2 weeks for our next episode of the Wheelie Podcast. We'll see you next time, everyone.